I mean, you mentioned the occult again. Occult, as I understand it, means hidden. So it has this esoteric connotation to it. Something which isn't readily available to the average person. And I think one of the problems you get in satanic circles is that it does want to have something which is marketable to a certain extent.
Yeah.
That's it's simple. You can understand it. Aspiring rebels can get it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But what could be more occult, insofar as it means hidden or esoteric, than taking a 17th century epic poem, and its satanic figure, and harvesting it, and capitalizing upon it, and exploiting the potential of its mythic figure.
But of course, if you do that successfully, it's no longer a cult. Which is that, I think that Satanism's relationship with the occult is problematic in terms of, I think Satanism is something that it operates in this weird middle level. It's under the counterculture. It's a lot of it is the stuff that's popular in an odd way that it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like horror movies and heavy metal and porn and all these kind of things. That's one aspect of Satanism, certainly, that it's kind of this stuff that's all around us but nobody admits to. And so the idea that I suppose Romantic Satanism should be a cult, I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't know. A lot of it's largely occult just because people can't be bothered to read it. It's we live in the TLDR culture. Too long didn't read, and so and a lot of Byron. Certainly. I was challenged by Paradise Lost when I was trying to get my teeth into it. And as you saw earlier on, when I was sort of mutilating Milton, it was like it's still a tough read, but that doesn't mean that this stuff isn't. I don't know.
Well, again, getting back into the idea of hiddenness or esoteric is that I don't think Satanism should be so accessible. I think the fact that there are challenges to the tradition.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That is a good point.
It's something that you really have to understand, and that understanding will place you in some sort of, for lack of a better term, special position.
Yeah,
I think that's significant.
Yes, no, I think there is a very good case for in a culture where increasingly everything is being rendered down to the lowest common denominator. And one of the things I try and do with my writing, and I don't know how successful I am, is that I do take a lot of stuff which is perhaps a little bit inaccessible or daunting, and I chew it up and I present it in a way in which people who didn't necessarily have the people who I think it was for, if you know what I mean. So you have, inverted commas, high culture. And high culture is like, the people who, study it at university and whatever else, and for whom it wasn't aimed at in the first place. And they're the people who consume it, and they don't understand it. And they're the people who it's aimed at, who never encounter it. And I try and, one of the things I try and do is to sort of, provide a bridge so as I can give it back to the people it was aimed at. And, and I think that's true of, in a way, maybe that's what you're talking about with, with Romantic Satanism, is it's studied by a lot of people for whom it was never aimed at, who don't understand it. They may understand the language, they may be happy with all the classical allusions, but I don't think they get it at a gut level. And, I like to think that some of the work I do, some of the writing I do, is get stuff like that and makes this stuff, kind of brings the people in who, because there are too many people out there. It's like you go to a museum and at least half the people are there just there because they thought they should be there and not really paying attention, and kind of like, I don't know. I'm rambling slightly.
So how do you think, I suppose, I'd like to ask, Satanism as a thing might benefit from more embracing more of the Miltonic Romantic tradition?
Oh, the language is beautiful. It's a good start. I think one of the things you can get from that is the sense in which that identifies Satan as being an icon for the importance of the Western cult of the individual. Because it's very difficult for us to appreciate the level to which the vast majority of the population of the world, I mean, in the West, because that's what we're talking about here, I guess, didn't really have an identity, which sounds like a crazy thing to say, but you belonged to the land, you needed to conform, and that's still true for a large part of the planet, and we escaped from that. That's how the West developed. So many, all the things which we value came from this kind of individualistic revolution, and that includes technological innovation, cultural innovation, political innovation. All these things came from this idea that potentially everybody matters. Not that everybody matters, but potentially everybody matters. And that is Milton's Satan is an icon for that, an archetype for that. He's an archetype for this Western cult of the individual. And I'm not expressing myself very clearly here. I mean, there's so many ideas sort of associated with this. It's so complicated. But that's one of the things which I think it's not to do with some sort of some ill-defined figure in an old kind of ancient Hebrew text, largely who's a product of mistranslation. That's kind of, and this is fascinating stuff. These are footnotes. Whereas what you have in the Miltonic Satan is an emblem for this idea that you can break out of a monolithic, totalitarian system, and you can't appreciate. I mean, I can't appreciate. I don't know what that's like. I can imagine what that's like. But this is a myth that expresses how this happens. And that's, in a sense, is what is important about Satanism. Is it says, you can express yourself. It's worth doing this regardless of the cost. Sometimes the self is the most important thing. There is something incredibly noble about this, and it's a selfish thing to do, but it's also a selfless thing to do, and a noble thing to do.